Greetings and welcome to this edition of Faith to Live By. I'm Pam Christian, your host, researcher, writer, and producer of this weekly show where each week I seek to help us consider current events from a biblical and prophetic perspective. My guest today is Alex Newman, a highly educated, informed, and dedicated man of God who will help us better understand how the many seemingly unrelated events occurring in our world today are actually part of a long-term plan designed to bring the entire population of the world to submit to a one-world government. This is not the plan of God, but the sinister plan of Satan and his followers, both spiritual beings and human beings. And because Satan's agenda has never been a threat to God, because Satan is already defeated, he will not win. God and all who are with God wins. But before I give more credence to all of this, I have a few announcements I need to make. First is an announcement where I'm asking for your help. As I mentioned last week, I know my podcast is heard by people who live in about 40 different countries. This is truly gratifying to me, and I deeply appreciate each and every one of you who listen. In addition to the countries I acknowledged last week, let me say thank you also to those of you who are listening from the Russian Federation, Switzerland, the Netherlands, Austria, Croatia, Brazil, Bahamas, Mexico, Puerto Rico, Sweden, and my largest audience by far, right here in the United States. You and all my listeners are the reason I do what I do, spending an average of about 30 hours a week to research and produce these shows. You may not realize it, but companies look for a podcaster to have an average of 5,000 regular listeners each and every month for it to be considered viable for their sponsorship. Until then, the growth and success of the podcast depends entirely upon the support of its listeners. My podcast contract comes up for renewal in July 2024, and I need to know from you if I should continue with this effort. Simply being transparent with you, I've received less than 20% of the hard costs since July 2020, and that doesn't include my time or supporting equipment, supplies, and services expenses. Please understand, I'm doing this at least for the full 4 years, so I'm not expecting to make a considerable amount of money off of this podcast, but I would like to at least break even with the hard costs if possible. So I am asking for your support in any of the following ways you can. First and foremost is prayer. Please pray for me and the show to reach many more people and for the audience to grow to the 5,000 at least so commercial sponsorship is viable. And let me know you're praying for me by sending me an email to that effect. I also ask you let me know if you want me to continue with this podcast by sending me an email of encouragement, sharing how this podcast benefits you. Please also tell others of this podcast, sending them the link or another means for them to easily become a regular listener. You can also send me an email from time to time letting me know what you like, don't like, or would like to hear as part of this show. Also, consider becoming a subscriber to my complimentary bi-monthly e-newsletter and follow me on social media so we can grow our relationship. Purchasing my books and products from my web store is another means of financial support that I would greatly appreciate from you, and you'll benefit because I tell you what, my books are all multi-award winning books and I'm very proud of them. Purchasing any of the services or products from my affiliates is also a help. Remember, the affiliates are not sponsors. They simply pay me a small commission should my efforts bring them a new customer. And also, consider becoming a financial partner with this ministry with either a one-time annual gift or a monthly reoccurring gift. Visit my website at PamelaChristianMinistries.com to provide any financial support. And my next announcement is to see if there's interest enough from you for me to plan a Christian tour in Greece in 2025. For a while now, I've been asking the subscribers to my bi-monthly e-newsletter to let me know where they'd like to travel. And based on what I've learned and the tour guides I have access to, we could have Greece be our first destination in 2025. I need to use this time now to find out if there's enough interest to actually book the tour. So, if you think you'd like to be part of the Faith to Live By tour with me in Greece in 2025, please send me an email. Send it to faithtoliveby@PamelaChristianMinistries.com with the words Greece Tour in the subject line, and then let me know how many people would be in your party in the body of the email. Your email is not a commitment or an obligation. It's just to let me know the interest to see if planning the trip makes sense. Once we have enough people expressing interest in potentially being part of such a trip, then I'll get the details and put it back out there for people to actually sign up. Again, if you want me to put a Christian tour together for 2025, send me an email to faithtoliveby@PamelaChristianMinistries.com. Put the words Greece Tour in the subject line and the number of people that you would bring in the body of the email if the trip becomes a reality. And because we are approaching the Christmas holidays, my last announcement is that I want to give you a Christmas gift. That's right. Listen to the end of this podcast to learn how you need only send me your email following the instructions I provide, and I will send you a Christmas gift, an ebook version of my first book in the Faith to Live By series. It's titled Examine Your Faith, Finding Truth in a World of Lies, and it's endorsed by Josh McDowell and others. In it, I explore absolute truth versus the claim that truth is relative. I explore the idea that all religions are equal and lead to the same God in heaven, and I have a chapter dedicated to each of the 5 major world religions and one on New Age, or secular humanism, so my readers can know the origin of the belief systems and know the tenets of their beliefs, to see the vast distinctions among them. Then, using extra-biblical historical evidence, I provide more for my readers to critically determine which religion makes the most sense to embrace and which leads to the one true God. Certainly, this book is excellent for seekers, but many seasoned Christians have let me know this book greatly helped them better know the reasons for their faith and how to best share their faith with others. And because this is an ebook, I can send it any place around the world. So again, listen to the end and learn how you can get a gift from me, wishing you a very Merry Christmas. Now, it's time for you to hear part 1 of my interview with Alex Newman. Alex is always a most valued guest on my show. He is an award-winning international journalist, educator, author, speaker, investor, and consultant with a global reputation for hard-hitting reporting, who seeks to glorify God in everything he does. Alex is also the founder of Liberty Sentinel and is involved with many other worthy projects. I want you to know more about Alex, so please use the links in the show notes. Today, Alex helps us understand how all the chaos in the world, which can be summed up with reference to the 7 mountains of society, which include family, religion, education, media, entertainment and arts, business, and government, has been planned, and it all works together in effort to achieve the sinister scheme for a one-world government. Here is part 1 of my interview with Alex Newman. Alex Newman, I have really been looking forward to having you back on the program. There is so much going on in the world today, and you have been studying many of these events for years. Let's start off by letting my audience know what's on your plate right now and the things that you are personally involved in.
Well, thank you so much, Pamela. It's an honor to be here with you again. I appreciate the work that you do. So I've got a lot I'm working on right now, just in the final stages of my next book on education. We're going to expose the history of the government indoctrination system masquerading as a school system. People really, even conservatives and Christians, fundamentally misunderstand what's going on here. I hear over and over again everywhere I go that the schools are broken and we need to restore them and things like this. I said, look, they're not broken. They're working very, very well at their intended purpose, which is to turn your children away from God, away from truth, away from family, away from their country, and away from everything good. They're having about 80-90% success rate. Right? So they're working very, very effectively at their intended purpose. There never was a golden era of government schools. God never delegated authority over education to the government. That's a family responsibility, and you might argue there's a supplemental role for the church. So I hope this book will fundamentally change the discussion that we have been having. I think the reason why conservatives and Christians have continued to lose ground over the last 50 or 60 years is primarily because of the indoctrination of our children. The godless, the pagans, they would never send their children to our Christian schools. Why in the world do we send our children to godless and pagan schools and expect them to come out Christian? So that's one of my big projects. Also head back to the Middle East very soon here in a couple of weeks for the UN Climate Summit. I was at the last one on the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt, where they unveiled the new 10 Commandments. They said they were working on the third covenant. Obviously, God gave us the new covenant. God gave us the old covenant. Now the UN and the clown car is going to give us the third covenant, is what they told me on camera. So this next one, You really should think of this next one as like the sentencing, right? At the last UN climate summit in the one in Egypt, John Kerry and Joe Biden pled guilty on behalf of America for basically every drought, every hurricane, every tornado, every flood, everything. Because we invented basically everything that you see around you. We liberated humanity from backbreaking labor. We extended lifespans by 40 or 50 years per person on average. Now we are guilty for our CO2 emissions. And so really there was no trial. John Kerry, our climate czar, and Joe Biden, our alleged president, just pled guilty on our behalf. And so this next meeting, they're going to work out the sentencing, exactly how much money do our children and grandchildren need to pay to the communists and totalitarian and Islamist kleptocrats of the world who kept their people in poverty, and what are the mechanisms by which our wealth is going to be extracted. And so that's going to be big. I'm sure there will be more religious developments as well. We see the one world religious system coming into view right at the last one. Like I said, they unveiled the new 10 Commandments. They had the UN of Religions was there. It's called Religions for Peace. They describe it as the UN of Religions. They say all the religions of the world are a part of it, which makes me glad I'm not part of the religions of the world. And it's truly crazy. And so in the Emirates, where this is going to be held, they have, of course, the Abrahamic family house, where they built a big synagogue, a big Catholic church, and a big mosque, all on the same property. So apparently we're supposed to unite with the pagans and with the infidels and the spirit worshipers and the ancestor worshipers and every kind of religious system in the world to save Mother Earth from our climate sins. So it's going to be a fun time, Pamela. Nobody else is doing this work, unfortunately. I wish others were. I hate to be the only one doing this stuff, but somebody's got to do it, and I guess the Lord has put me in a place to do it. So I'll do the best I can as long as the Lord gives me breath before He takes me home.
Well, we'll be praying that you have help and assistance come your way and that more people will get involved. These are the kinds of things that are going on all around us, while there are so many other things that our attention has been diverted to, namely the Arab-Israeli conflict, and that's not even a good term for what's actually going on in Israel. I've been covering that a lot for my audience, wanting so much for people to have the truth. Would you share your wisdom and insights and experience with respect to what's actually going on in Israel today?
Yeah, well, I'll do my best. Thank you, Pamela. And I know it's a very touchy subject, and I know people always get mad no matter what you say here. But I think what's going on is there is a concerted effort to get the world involved in another global war. The globalists have figured out that war is the most effective means for advancing globalism known to man. And in fact, they've said this publicly in their own documents. Early 1960s, State Department commissioned a report from Lincoln Bloomfield called "A World Effectively Controlled by the United Nations," where they figured, and they put this on paper, right? Anybody can read it, that the fastest way to bring us to this one world system was to use war or the threat of war. So Ukraine, Russia didn't get a lot of traction. China, Taiwan, free China versus communist China. We'll see how that goes. But the conflagration in the Middle East may be a very good candidate for that. So one of the things that we know for sure is that the Islamic jihadist movement is not operating on its own. It has friends in very, very high places all around the world, including here in the United States. And one of the things that I have found so interesting that is really not talked about but should be is the role of the communists and the globalists in weaponizing Islam and weaponizing jihad against the West and against the state of Israel in particular. Again, this is not my opinion, and I don't mean to downplay the influence of Islamic theology. Clearly, this is not a new phenomenon. Even under the leadership of Muhammad, who led numerous military campaigns against his enemies, there was, of course, mass slaughter of Christians, mass slaughter of Jews. So this is not a new phenomenon. I don't mean to imply that the communists are completely responsible for this, but we know from defectors, including one of the most important defectors to ever leave the communist bloc, General Ion Pacepa of Romania, that the Soviet KGB and its allies in Eastern Europe, including the Romanian intelligence service, sent thousands of communist agents throughout the Middle East to radicalize and inflame Muslims and tell them that America was the great Satan and Israel was the little Satan, and that they needed to devote all their energies to destroying the great Satan and the little Satan. And we kind of see the fruit of that. Of course, we've had people in our own government who've been doing this for a very long time. If you go back to the 80s, we were supporting the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. Colossal error, from a common sense perspective, although I suspect they knew exactly what would happen. Even more recently, we've got a 2012 document from the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency that essentially outlines a plan to create ISIS. And if you read it, you can't come to any other conclusion. They say, and I'm not quoting exactly, I don't have the document in front of me, but very, very close to what this document says, that the West, Turkey, and the Gulf powers support the Syrian rebellion. We all knew that. They call them moderate rebels, right? They gave us this propaganda for years. Then they said, we know that the Syrian rebellion is led by Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood. Okay, what? You're telling me you're supporting a rebellion led by Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood? That sounds like a stupid idea. And then they go on to say that the powers supporting the opposition, which they had already mentioned, the U.S., the Western powers, Turkey, the Gulf Arab Sunni dictatorships, etc., wanted to create what they describe in this document as a Salafist principality in eastern Syria. Salafism is kind of this one branch of really hardcore Islam, the Wahhabism that they practice in Saudi Arabia and other places. So they wanted a Salafist principality in eastern Syria. And of course, they got it. We call it the Islamic State. So efforts to manipulate Muslims have been going on for many, many generations by globalists, by communists, and by others. And you see this very clearly reflected in the war on Israel, right? Hamas is, of course, funded by Iran, by the Iranian dictatorship. And of course, the Iranian dictatorship is supported by the communist Chinese. It's supported by Moscow, supported by the Kremlin. And this is not a secret, right? I mean, this is all happening very, very openly. In fact, they're in multiple alliances, including the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, where they all work together, even do military drills together. So none of this is a secret. Then you have them supporting a Hezbollah. You have all of these efforts to basically turn Muslims into suicide bombers, into jihadists who will continually wage war on Jews and on Christians and on Israel and on America and on the West. And there are so many different agendas at work here, Pamela. I could go on and on, but one of the things that we saw very clearly over the last maybe 2 decades or so is, I believe, a concerted effort to flood the Western world with people from the Middle East and people from North Africa. We saw it very clearly in Libya, where the Obama administration allied with actual Al-Qaeda, right? The Libyan Islamic Fighting Group, which the U.S. military knew was Al-Qaeda. I've got the documents proving they knew that was Al-Qaeda. And they bombed Libya to smithereens. They blew up the infrastructure, which is a war crime. They blew up the water infrastructure, the power infrastructure. I mean, that is a war crime of colossal proportions. And so what did they do? They destroyed the country. And then they also destroyed Syria. They destroyed Iraq. They destroyed Afghanistan. It's not saying any of these places were paradises or utopias, but they had running water. They had power. You could go to work and you could go to church without worrying about somebody blowing up your church. Those things don't happen anymore, of course. And then these same people who destroyed all these countries rolled out the red carpet and invited them into Europe, invited them into the United States, invited them to Canada. They would be pumping them into Japan and South Korea if the Japanese and the South Koreans weren't resisting that with everything they've got. So you've got all that going on. And of course, you have basically a total global war against the state of Israel. Not just by the Hamas and the Hezbollah, but by their allies, by the Iranians, by a lot of the Sunni Arab forces and Sunni Islamic forces. You've got, of course, the communists, the Chinese, etc., openly involved in this. And then, very unfortunately for the Israelis, you've got enemies at the highest levels of their own government. Right. I think the first clue that something was a little bit suspicious about Netanyahu is that he ordered everybody in the country, man, woman, and child, to take these dangerous injections. And so you've got very patriotic, very religious, prominent Jewish Israelis, Zionists who would die for their country, accusing some of the people in the top levels of the Israeli government of treason. People like Jonathan Pollard. Jonathan Pollard was a guy who spent a lot of time in federal prison here in the United States for spying on the United States on behalf of Israel. So nobody's going to accuse him of being anti-Israeli. And yet here he is saying that at the highest levels of the Israeli government, there is treason. At the highest levels of the Israeli military, there is treason. And so I think ultimately what we are going to see going forward here, unless God intervenes or something changes radically, is a full-blown total war on faithful Jews and Christians. And I think we're starting to see that materialize. We're starting to see a lot of that on college campuses in America. It's a very, very dangerous situation. Of course, we know God is on his throne and the devil can, plan as he likes. His plans won't necessarily come to pass. But that's kind of a rough outline of what I see going on here. And I think ultimately they do want another global war. They want millions of people dead, and they want to use that as the pretext then to fundamentally transform everything about life, everything about global governance. We saw after World War II, they gave birth to the United Nations, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, what eventually became the European Union, which is now the model for the regional governments they're imposing on the world. And I do believe In fact, I don't believe, I know for a fact that they want to impose a similar regional government on the peoples of the Middle East. And I know that because the Council on Foreign Relations has been agitating for this for many years. They have a guy called Mohammed Hussein, I think it is, who's a senior fellow over at the Council on Foreign Relations. He did an interesting article for their magazine, Foreign Affairs, some years ago, where he called for putting Jews, Turks, Arabs, Persians, etc., all under a single Middle Eastern union, which is, and he actually used the European Union as an example. He said, look at all the war they had in Europe, wasn't it terrible? But look how they solved it. They just gave up their sovereignty and they created a supranational, regional, all-powerful government. We ought to do the same thing in the Middle East, where we'll put the Jews and the Turks and the Arabs and the Persians together, and then they'll have to stop fighting. Frankly, if I was a Jew in Israel, or if I was a Turk in Turkey, or if I was an Arab in Arabia, or if I was a Persian in Iran, I would say, no way, right? We want to control our own destiny. We don't want to live under the rule of people who don't share anything in common with us, people from other nations, people with other religions. Why would we want to do that? So a lot of agendas going on at the same time. Of course, Satan is a great deceiver, a great schemer, but ultimately, before this is all said and done, he's going to be destroyed and thrown in the lake of fire. So praise the Lord.
Absolutely. You're a wealth of information, and I'm so glad that you're able to help shed light on all of these things because, as I said, we get focused on what's going on in one area or a second area without being able to have the bandwidth to really understand everything. So you are helping by leaps and bounds. Alex first spoke of the education system in America and how it isn't broken, but functioning exactly as planned. I want you to please support him in the effort of sounding the alarm and getting the education system completely overhauled. Get his new book, soon to be released, and sign up for his e-newsletter to keep informed. You'll find the links in the show notes. Alex also explained how he would again be attending the United Nations Climate Change Summit. I was very surprised to hear him say that he was alone in doing the work that he's doing. We must support him to help stop the efforts for a one-world government and religion and everything else these self-appointed elite are attempting. I also have a link in the show notes for you to watch Alex's presentation on how we are at the critical point in the effort for a one-world government. I will bring you part 2 of my interview with Alex next week, but until then, listen to an excerpt from the prophecy God provided through Julie Green posted on December 4, 2023. God said, and I loosely quote, "For I, the Lord, this day am telling my children, distractions are coming to deceive and destroy you. They are coming with great force to bring great fear and overwhelm you to overcome your nation. But I, the Lord, have warned you, my children, about these distractions, the enemy's plans, and what they are about to do. But hear me on this. I say they are through. They will not have you. When your enemy comes in and tries to deceive you with all these distractions and efforts to destroy you, know, my children, I am coming in like a flood to deliver and save you and heal and restore you. I am bringing a greater flood, greater and mightier than the evil before you. The pressure is mounting against your enemies. They're losing their narratives. They're losing their grip, and they're losing their control over the nations, over the population. They are losing, and they are shouting and enraged because they don't know why. Great hardship is what they desired for you on a daily basis. My children, you think this has been hard, but it is nothing compared to what they were about to pull off. They wanted the world to cry out for them in desperation. They wanted my people to turn their back on me for them. They think they are God. They think they can win. They think they can have my nation and control the world with their money. They think they can control governments around the world and control the church. Control my body? Control my body? Enemies of Almighty God, you will not have my body. You will not have my nations. You will not have the financial prosperity that you so think you can keep hold of and keep control. No. I said in my word, the gold is mine, the silver is mine, and I have said, I am shaking the nations, and the desire of all nations is coming in." End quote. Of course, the desire of all nations is yet another name for Jesus. This is a powerful word, and you'll want to hear and watch every bit of it, so use the link in my show notes. One last very important action item is what you can and must do to help stop the World Health Organization. 3 weeks ago, I had James Roguski on discussing the unrelenting efforts of the World Health Organization under the direction of the United Nations to take over the sovereignty of the nations of the world under the guise of health. In reality, the aim is world dominance and power under a one-world government. I hope you listened to that program and took the action steps necessary to prevent the World Health Organization. But if you haven't, please do so because the deadline is December 10th, 2023. Our letters and letters from the heads of state for our respective nations need to be submitted by December 10th, 2023. You'll find a link to get all the forms you need to do your part under the action steps in my show notes. As mentioned, next week I'll have part 2 of my interview with Alex Newman to further help us understand world events from a biblical and prophetic perspective. As always, my goal with this podcast is to help us gain spiritual victory over life's issues. This concludes my podcast for today. I really do put my heart and soul into these podcasts, wanting very much for you to know the truth and find the strength of faith that you need in these very dark days. Won't you shoot me an email and let me know how this podcast impacts you? My email is faithtoliveby@PamelaChristianMinistries.com. I truly welcome your communication. If this podcast blesses you, and I certainly hope it does because you are the reason I work as hard as I do, would you consider partnering with me in my vision? You know my whole goal is to help people discover and live in life-giving truth and to experience all the hope truth provides. You can, and I hope you do personally, share truth with others on your own. But have you thought about how many more people you could reach by partnering with me? Help me grow this podcast, get my books into more people's hands, and talk me up to others to get me more speaking engagements and increase this podcast audience. Then together, as partners, we will be making a much greater impact than we can on our own. There are several ways you can choose to partner with me. Certainly, telling others about me and my ministry along with prayer is top of the list. There is nothing as powerful as personal endorsements or word-of-mouth referrals. Buying my books and products is another way. All of my books in the Faith to Live By series were written to help people better understand the Christian faith and how to successfully live it out. The first book is Examine Your Faith, Finding Truth in a World of Lies. The second, Renew Your Hope, Remedy for Personal Breakthroughs. And the third is Revive Your Life, Rest for Your Anxious Heart. There are 2 more in the series about the end times. The first one is Prepare for the Harvest, Confidence in God's End-Time Promises, written for Christians to properly understand God's plans for His people during the end times. And the other is Prepare for the Harvest, God's Challenge to the Church Today. It's written to help church leadership be ready in every way possible for the long-prophesied billion-soul harvest. Visit my website and get any or all of these books with a deep 20% discount by using the word TRUTH at checkout. I also welcome donations, but for now they're not tax-deductible. However, I'm working on that, so listen in the weeks to come and you'll learn more about how you can support me through donations that will be tax-deductible. Supporting the businesses I feature as affiliate partners is yet another way you can partner with me. I seek to find affiliates who can offer you goods and services you need, and I have some very exciting money-saving America First goods and services you will not want to miss out on. Newest to my affiliate list is a company I'm exceedingly excited to introduce you to. If you're like me, you're tired of paying very high prices for cable television, and you've been waiting to find just the right company who shares your values to replace your cable service. Well, I found it. It's called Q Streaming. They provide over 3,000 channels, including live TV with local stations from across the United States, U.S. networks, sports networks, movie networks, and pay-per-view events. You get all that for about half of what most cable companies charge, and there's no contract, just a monthly subscription. Using the link in the show notes, go and look around and sign up to start viewing the programs you like for a fraction of what you're paying now. All while supporting a Christian-owned and operated company that exclusively uses word-of-mouth advertising so as not to spend money on commercial advertisement that supports the woke movement. And don't forget, when it comes to your health, I also have affiliate partners Mfinity and Dr. Zelenko's Z-Stack supplements. You can learn more on the affiliates page and the information in the show notes. Also, there's Operation Tomahawk, which Scott McKay started. It's a subscription program that allows you to get your household and personal care items from a company that is American-owned and operated, because we don't want to support the deep state. And regarding your finances, I want you to know about Dr. Kirk Elliott. He's a personal wealth advisor who offers free consultations to understand your financial goals and help you reach them. When you purchase my books, products, or services, or products and services from any of my affiliates, you get something you want, and at the same time, you support me. It's truly a benefit for all of us. So why not shop for yourself or to get gifts for friends and family? Your support is greatly appreciated. All affiliate partners' information is in the show notes, and I have a dedicated web page where you can learn even more, and you can hear the interviews I've conducted in the vetting process. Of course, you need to do your own due diligence to make your own decisions what to purchase, but to help you, I am researching companies and interviewing their representatives and using their products or services myself to provide you a personal recommendation. There's a link to all the interviews in the show notes. I sincerely hope you appreciate my dedication to you through these podcasts. Let me know how this podcast impacts you and what you're now doing in response to the equipping you've received through me. Again, my email is faithtoliveby@PamelaChristianMinistries.com. If you like the content and resource material I bring with this podcast, you'll find much more by connecting with me through my blog. In fact, my blog has been awarded 2 unsolicited awards for Christian content. And I'm very active on social media. I can actually cover more on social media than I can with this weekly podcast. And to receive even more, please be sure to check out my dedicated podcast listeners page called Beyond the Podcast. Here's where we can connect exclusively, and you can download complimentary devotionals, resources, and more. And on that page, I also ask you to help me learn more about what you want by completing the form visible once you scroll down the page. And I would especially appreciate you subscribing to my complimentary bi-monthly e-newsletter. As a new subscriber, you can choose one of 3 gifts I offer in appreciation for your subscription. Subscribing will make you a preferred member where you will receive special announcements and offers not available to others. Depending upon where you listen to my podcast, if you've enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and review the show on iTunes, Spotify, Google, or wherever these features are available. A review helps the show reach more people, it helps spread the gospel, and helps people learn how to better apply their Christian faith. Okay, are you ready to learn how you can get a complimentary copy of my multi-award-winning book, Examine Your Faith, Finding Truth in a World of Lies, endorsed by Josh McDowell, as my Christmas gift to you? Well, all you need to do is send me an email with the word Christmas in the subject line, and I will send you my Christmas gift to you, an ebook copy of my first book in the Faith to Live By series. From December 6th, 2023 to December 31st, 2023, if you will simply send me the email with the word Christmas in the subject line, I will gladly send you the ebook. Send your email to faithtoliveby@PamelaChristianMinistries.com. And since you'll be buying Christmas gifts for your friends and family, why not consider giving my books as gifts? If you purchase through my web store directly from me and use the promo code TRUTH, TRUTH, you'll get a 20% discount on your entire order. I hope you'll join me next week and tell your friends and family to listen right here on Faith to Live By, where we learn how to gain spiritual victory over life's issues. Until next week, I'm Pam Christian, asking you to remember, Christ died for us. The least we can do is live for Him.